Welcome to the sixth session where we are using ancient wisdom to meet the new goal of education by creating the basis of a global well-being curriculum. The IKS's ways of knowing, we are now moving on from Pratyaksha and Anuman to Upaman to show how the current knowledge system CKS and IKS develop knowledge but differently. So, how IKS uses its ways of knowing to tap the source of wisdom. How do some IKS concepts develop? This will be our journey. The last session was about inference, Anumana, as a way of knowing of IKS. This session is about Upamana, comparison. The IB curriculum does not include Anumana and Upamana in its ways of knowing. But this has not stopped scientists and researchers from creating prosperity by using them. The inferences drawn and the comparisons made by them are not only gross, but they are subtle too. Does this negate the basis of difference between current knowledge system and IKS? Not at all. The current knowledge system explores the different expressions of energy and the resultant phenomena. It compares and infers its different expressions. Such inferences and comparisons, even as they may be subtle, show and use the power of the mind. These inferences and comparisons led to prosperity, not well-being, in the last 15 years or 150 years, according to OECD. What inferences does IKS seek? IKS seeks to infer that one energy that powers all phenomena. The same energy must be powering human life, thought, and action. It then seeks the source of the energy within all individuals, transforming them to create well-being for oneself and others simultaneously. Similarly, what is the nature of comparison IKS seeks? We've talked about inference. So what is the nature of comparison it seeks? IKS compares humans with all other species. Its comparison results in finding that one thing that declares the distinction of humans from other species, all other species. The expression of this distinction is in the second goal of life of Artha. The ability to look beyond food, clothing, shelter, and even go beyond the mind declares this distinction. The current knowledge system also is using concepts of inference and comparison, but its inferences and comparisons use the first way of knowing, that is sense perception. The last session shows that despite current knowledge system or CKS using inference, an inference of how its inferences could not prevent social pain can be drawn. Why? This is because sense perception is its first way of knowing. The evidence of IKS we will present will show how it has achieved the goal of education desired by OECD. It is obvious that the nature of inferences it draws from nature is different. It seeks that one energy that is behind multiplicity. It then teaches how to apply it to human nature, that is our nature. If we compare the multiplicity in nature, it is very useful. CKS, current knowledge system, uses comparison too, but its use of the same could not prevent social pain. How does IKS use its ways of knowing in a different way than CKS or current knowledge system? While sense perception directs CKS's ways of knowing, Shabda Pramana directs the IKS ways of knowing. Hence, IKS explores within ourselves, our inner nature, and seeks the voice of conscience to guide it. This voice of conscience declares the distinction between humans and all other species. Suppose you achieve almost 100% of what you want: money to live comfortably, a name for yourself, and get wide respect. What is that one thing you would like to do? The previous question was about the future. What about the present? What is that one thing most important to you today? What do you think is the difference between want, need, and desire? Can you use Indian knowledge system's ways of knowing, that is comparison and inference, and relate it to your personal behavior? We can stop the session here, and in 5 minutes we would like you to write down your answers to these 3 questions. IKS, Indian knowledge system, which is truly an international knowledge system, investigates one source of knowledge, that is nature. Its ways of doing is observed to find our way of knowing. A few questions before this class asked you to search within yourself. There are many answers that are hidden inside you. They can reveal your nature of thought. Is it different from others' thought? Many of us love nature, as well as our own nature. Nature, which is outside us, is seen through sense perception, but it has much to teach. It teaches us that though all phenomena in nature are so very different, yet their fundamental reality is one: atoms. The current knowledge system investigates the differences using comparison and inference. IKS does the same, but also explores within to see the underlying reality of oneness simultaneously. How? It says that another nature exists within us. It makes each one of us unique, different. Yet the fundamental reality is one, that we are all humans. What is the unity behind the diversity in nature and among human beings? Is that unity the source of knowledge? To get to the source, what will be the way of knowing? If we begin by observing nature outside, we will just see atoms. CKS and IKS, current knowledge system, and Indian knowledge system, which we call an international knowledge system, explore nature in different ways. CKS approaches through sense perception, while IKS explores energy that surrounds us within humans and within nature. How? Nature has multiplicity of phenomena. Humans have a multiplicity of natures. We can get confused by the multiplicity. To comprehend, and apply knowledge within this multiplicity. IKS seeks the standpoint of unity that joins everything. Analyzing nature outside and within individuals from a standpoint of unity, the source of multiplicity is revealed, and the knowledge system creates well-being along with prosperity. This session is on comparison of CKS and IKS. What is the difference between them? CKS explores the differences in the phenomena of nature. IKS first unites all the phenomena as arising from one source, but then divides it as emerging from 5 basic elements that are the cause of all multiplicity. These 5 elements are ether, air, fire, water, and earth. CKS explores the gross nature of humans and is unable to guide the subtle nature of the human mind. If it had done the latter successfully, mental health problems would be non-existent today. IKS separates the gross from the subtle, and both of these from the causal. The ability to search for the truth in this manner and comprehend and apply it leads to well-being along with prosperity. This does not mean that CKS or current knowledge system does not try to understand human nature. In fact, CKS, current knowledge system, has many theories about human nature. It, however, has not been successful in guiding it to create well-being along with prosperity. A popular model by Maslow gives a need hierarchy for humans. He expressed it in a paper titled Theory of Human Motivation. Harvard's Professor Porter's research shows that competitive advantage of nations is driven by human motivation. It pushes the investment-driven and innovation-driven stages of competitive advantage of nations. Professor Porter also found that lack of motivation is responsible for the nation to go into decline stage after it has become wealth-driven. Therefore, the work of Maslow, given in the 21st century, is still noted and used in the 21st century. Maslow's final goal of humans, to quote him, is, and I quote, "What a man can be, he must be," unquote. Goldstein gave a term self-actualization. The term self-actualization raises an important issue: how to achieve it. Maslow's theory gives an idea that it will naturally happen once the lower order needs are fulfilled. This is where IKS, Indian knowledge system, which was an international knowledge system, seems to diverge from this assumption. In IKS, Vivekananda links the nature outside to the nature within individuals, as we have done just a few minutes ago. On self-actualization, Vivekananda does not seem to feel that it is something that will happen naturally if we keep on satisfying all our intermediate needs. He says, and I quote, "Man is man so long as he is struggling to rise above nature, and this nature is both internal and external. Not only does it comprise the laws that govern the particles of matter outside us and in our bodies, but also the more subtle nature within, which is, in fact, the motive power governing the external," unquote. What is nature? What we witness in nature is ever-changing phenomena. Seasons change, everything changes. Will humans too keep changing their perception as these seasons change, or will they seek a stable inner nature that goes beyond the sense perception that nature has endowed us with? Vivekananda mentions that, and I quote, "the more subtle nature within, which is in fact the motive power governing the external," unquote. Three things are important in this sentence, for they summarize three key points raised till now. 1. Gross things are seen in nature through gross organs of sense perception. 2. There is a more subtle nature that exists. It first has to be investigated, comprehended, and finally experienced within ourselves. And 3. Once this subtle aspect is experienced, it is the motive power that governs external phenomena. This brings us back to the idea of transformation of human motivation. Professor Porter's research has identified the key role of motivation in advance and decline stage in the stages of development in nations. The stages in development of nations, according to his findings, depend directly on the motivations that individuals have. Transforming motivation is the goal of IKS. Research results show that this motivation leads to a decline stage after all human needs are more than adequately met. As desires are endless, is the process of fulfilling them leading to a decline? It is clear that if the motivation for self-actualization is achieved, the decline stage can be prevented. Does the secret of achieving the self-actualization stage or discovering the true potential of each individual lie in understanding this dichotomy in the approach of CKS and IKS? This dichotomy. Is this dichotomy so important that a full session should be devoted to it? The wealthiest countries seek a solution after 2008. They are probably addressing the issue of human motivation that should shift from creating prosperity to creating well-being. They see a critical role of education in this. Maslow states that after basic and physiological needs of humans are met, humans would seek to actualize their potential. The World Wars or the OECD report covering the last 150 years does not show that this has been an endeavor of the richest of the rich. In fact, the nature of inequalities show that the rich became richer and the poor poorer. Why have humans, after meeting their physiological and other needs, not sought to actualize their potential? Why did they feel that actualizing their potential means maximizing personal gain, even at a great cost to society? Did a knowledge system hamper this flow of human needs that Maslow identified, probably as a natural process? What should have been normal human behavior seems to have become an exception, not the rule. Will the fourth industrial revolution use a different way of knowing to enable individuals to discover their true potential and be life satisfied? Will artificial intelligence free humans to pursue self-actualization needs, or will it take away the motivation to work or actualize? What concepts can transform the motivation, the perspective of the way things change in the world? The method of comparison Upamana between CKS and IKS is used now to address the current challenge. Who faces the challenge? Humankind does. What can solve it? Education. A challenge faces the 6 philosophies of education today. And this challenge is listed on the screen. These are the 6 philosophies. We should be rising in our need hierarchy according to Maslow. But are we? OECD's report doesn't seem to give evidence of it. Is the current knowledge system unable to give a unified worldview amidst diversity? Everybody has two eyes, but they may have different vision. To illustrate the point, we discuss two different worldviews possible about the use of artificial intelligence in Industry 4.0. Hence, how to use sense perception even though physical facts seen are the same. Elon Musk and many others believe that businesses will shut down with automation. This school of thought feels that everything will be so automated that there will be no work for anybody to do. To sustain fulfillment of needs, a universal basic income will be given to all. Will they feel that they have no way to express their individuality and creativity? Will it give them a feeling that they are not utilizing their human potential? The chairman of Tata Group, that includes the global IT player TCS, has written a book, Digital Nation. He talks of reimagining IT as a human aid and not as a force for replacing humans. It talks of how to use IT to lead to more employment and growth in India. It gives a vision for 2030 where all Indians use cloud, automated learning and artificial intelligence for the jobs they need to do. The vision shared is of all Indians seeking access to quality jobs, better healthcare and skill-based education. It seeks to prove that the reality of humans and technology coexisting is possible. The book seeks to show how it can be made within reach. Is this like the headstand of yoga that cures tiredness after a long walk and rejuvenates the system? If universal basic income becomes a reality, will it be good? The UK Health Foundation may not agree. It finds that not only a job but a good, productive job is necessary to maintain good health. But will jobs lead to self-actualization needs being fulfilled? What prevents the transition to self-actualization becoming automatic? Michael Porter's research shows that the automatic process of development of society is to go into a decline stage. Will the development of artificial intelligence with such a vision lead to a decline in society? Maslow, on the other hand, states that it is natural for the individual to get satisfied and seek self-actualization. How to solve this dichotomy between Maslow's theory and the study of practices by Michael Porter? Will solving it impact the way to achieve the new goal of education? IKS solves this dichotomy by its three-way distinction of human beings as the gross body, the subtle mind, and by exploring the causal phenomena behind the gross and the subtle. A better investigation, comprehension, and experience of one's own potential is the IKS way. Therefore, earlier sessions made the distinction between the gross and the subtle. Is lack of it in the current knowledge system making subtle minds helpless in preventing social pain? With its ways of guiding the subtle mind and exploring the causal, IKS does not wait for self-realization to come naturally. It designs its knowledge system around 6 philosophies, investigating truth using them, comprehending reality and applying it in life makes well-being a natural choice for the individual and society. Living life in the awareness and with the attitude that results from them leads to achieving the goal of education. Evidence proves this is possible. CKS and IKS the base of IKS rests on developing self-actualization needs first. If we do it in this way, who will balance? This is what current knowledge system wonders. A rejuvenating headstand is the IKS way. IKS sees nature as being in a state of dynamic balance. A spinning top can show that nature is in a state of dynamic balance. It demonstrates how it can be. Humans have to simply align with nature by understanding it. Rotation keeps nature's confusing multiplicity in a dynamic balance. Let's remember the Earth also keeps rotating around its axis. Human nature too will experience the truth of this dynamic balance by rotating the mind over the 6 philosophies of IKS, which are the Shad Darshan. The CKS and IKS comparison, if we compare them or the upamana between them, then this dynamic balance is achieved within each individual using the 6 philosophies or Shad Darshans of IKS, which are Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purv Mimamsa and Uttar Mimamsa. The 6 texts are based on A. the Vedas, B. non-belief, C. inner vision. They explain incidents and events that pertain to all the 3 time frames of past, present and future. They have taught us how to lead a good life. They explain the nature of the mind, which is responsible for all intelligence, intellect and discrimination. IKS creates a dynamic balance by investigating truth using the 6 philosophies. Their comprehension and application enables a dynamic balance. The difference is that awareness of the peak begins its search. We start from self-actualization. We do not start from sense perception. That is the difference between IKS and CK. The oldest known texts in the world are the Vedas. Their ideas of eternal righteous conduct are the basis of the international knowledge system which was created and now is known as the Indian knowledge system. A different level of consciousness is needed to appreciate their depth and experience their meaning. This is what experts say. In the foreword of the book Hymns to the Mystic Fire, Sri Aurobindo reveals this inadequate understanding. He questions, and I quote, "Is this all legend and moonshine, or a groundless and even nonsensical tradition?" Unquote. He states that modern European scholarship insists that the Upanishads give them a meaning based on their imagination or a fanciful interpretation. I quote him, "And it has persuaded the mind of modern India." Unquote. So this European interpretation has made modern India believe that this is all legend, moonshine, or a groundless or even nonsensical tradition. This is what Sri Aurobindo says. He summarizes the West's inadequate understanding as follows, and I quote him, "The Vedic religion was in this account only a worship of nature, gods, full of solar myths and consecrated by sacrifices and a sacrificial liturgy primitive enough in its ideas and contents, and it is these barbaric prayers that are the much wanted, hallowed and apotheosized Veda." Unquote. This is what he says is the European attitude towards Vedas, Sri Aurobindo says. Without elevated consciousness, he says, this will be the view of anyone. The purpose of IKS is to elevate consciousness, to see the larger truth, to experience the larger truth. He explains that most civilizations studied nature first to relate it in a personal way. And I quote him, There can be no doubt that in the beginning there was a worship of the powers of the physical world, the sun, moon, heaven, earth, wind, rain and storm, etc., the sacred rivers, and a number of gods who presided over the workings of nature. That was the general aspect of the ancient worship in Greece, Rome, India, and among other ancient peoples. But in all these countries, these gods began to assume a higher, a psychological function. Unquote. Why is the meaning of ideas of eternal righteous conduct not obvious to all in the Vedic mantras? Sri Aurobindo explains, and I quote him, "Under pressure of the necessity to mask their meaning with symbols and symbolic words, for secrecy must be observed, the rishis resorted to fixed double meanings, a device easily manageable in the Sanskrit language, where one word often bears several different meanings, but not easy to render in an English translation and very often impossible." Unquote. I quote three of Sri Aurobindo's examples. I quote, "The word for cow, go, meant also light or a ray of light. The cows of the Veda were the herds of the sun, the rays of the sun of truth and light and knowledge. The word krita means ghee or clarified butter, and this was one of the chief elements of the sacrificial rite. But krita could also mean light, from the root ghra, to shine, and it is used in this sense in many passages. Thus the horses of Indra, the Lord of heaven, are described as dripping with light. It certainly does not mean that ghee dripped from them as they ran." Unquote. It is laughable if you don't know their code. The Westerners, he says, did not know it, and the modern Indians did not choose to find. He gives another example of how symbolism, in its elevated tradition, is mocked at due to the inadequate understanding of researchers. I quote, "As the Vedic cow is the symbol of light, so the Vedic horse is a symbol of power, spiritual strength, force of tapasya. When the rishi asks Agni for a horse form cow in front gift, he is not asking really for a number of horses forming a body of the gift with some cows walking in front. He is asking for a great body of spiritual power led by the light." Unquote. He clarifies that, and I quote, "The sun in the Veda and frequently in the Upanishads is the Godhead of the supreme truth and knowledge, and his rays are the light emanating from the supreme truth and knowledge." Unquote. He reveals that without the experience of the inner meaning of the Vedas, further development is impossible. I quote him, "The secret knowledge of the Veda is the seed which is evolved later into the Vedanta. The thought around which all is centered is the seeking after truth, light, immortality. There is a truth deeper and higher than the truth of outward existence, a light greater and higher than the light of human understanding, which comes by revelation and inspiration, and immortality towards which the soul has to rise." Unquote. Seers seeking eternal ideas of righteous conduct found long ago what quantum physicists have found now, that a truth higher than the truth of what we see exists. Sri Aurobindo says, and I quote him, "We have to find our way to that, to get into touch with this truth and immortality, to be born into the truth, to grow in it, to ascend in spirit into the world of truth and to live in it. To do so is to unite ourselves with the Godhead and to pass from mortality into immortality. This is the first and the central teaching of the Vedic mystics." Unquote. How was it different from Western thought, he says. And I quote him. Sri Aurobindo says, "The Platonists, developing their doctrine from the early mystics, held that we live in relation to two worlds, a world of higher truth, which might be called the spiritual world, and that in which we live, the world of the embodied soul, which is derived from the higher but also degraded from it into an inferior truth and inferior consciousness." The Vedic mystics held this doctrine in a more concrete and pragmatic form, for they had the experience of these two worlds. There is the inferior truth here, and of this world mixed as it is with much falsehood and error, and there is a world or home of truth, the truth, the right, the vast, where all is truth conscious." Unquote. His series of articles, The Secret of Veda, in the philosophical magazine Arya, explain the inner meaning and the way needed for interpretation of the Vedic mantras. Upamana, comparison of the CKS, current and IKS, Indian knowledge systems, both search for the truth. The truth of the individual is the first focus of IKS. The instrument investigating all of creation should be fully known first, so IKS believes. The body, the senses, these are the instruments, so we must know the truth of these instruments before we start investigating. Sanskrit, the language of the Vedas, has been compared to a Turing machine. It cannot be compared to other languages. It is difficult for other languages to understand the context of the Vedas because they are not used to probing the scientific etymology of words to comprehend dimensions of their deep meaning. Hence, its concepts are misunderstood. The root of the word gives the dimensions from which it has to be visualized. What dimension gives the most elevating feeling reveals the experience of the drashta, the seer. There is no scope for lower order truth in the search of the highest truth. This is the attitude of the seeker, and the Vedic tradition is only for the seeker of the truth. Similarly, the philosophies of IKS are at a deeply psychological level. They reform the worldview. They transform the origin of thought within, not just inform about the possibilities of constructive human thought. It is difficult to explain the difference to those who refuse to enter the area of experience from the area of thought and conjecture. Hence, don't be disheartened by others' inability to understand the depth of these philosophies. Their apprehensions may be as hollow as the understanding of eternal ideas of righteous conduct in Vedas by the critics. IKS is not about transforming them, but it deals with self-transformation only. Let us explore the roots of the comparison between current knowledge system and IKS. Let us do their upamana. The transmission of knowledge in IKS, the Indian knowledge system or international knowledge system, is in three parts. The first uses symbols that humans can see and experience the difference between them. The examples are of fire, sun, horses, etc. These exist in the Vedas. One way of seeing these differences is by using IKS's Dvaita philosophy. But how to comprehend their inner significance? For this, we need to use this second part, our mind. The way that the mind can comprehend them is in the Upanishads. This is used in IKS's education, the philosophy of Vishishtadvaita. The final stage is merging with the source that sits on the chair, whose four legs are creation, preservation, creative destruction, and the energy or Shakti powering all. The final texts are the Atmavidya texts of Brahma Sutras, Bhagavad Gita, etc. The Advaita. They deal with the knowledge of the self, not as the ego of I, but the discovery of I of the source that is the witness to all the four legs of the chair, now taken as the human body. Hence, all phenomena of nature are now internalized and witnessed within. For ease of understanding in daily life, we can look upon humans as being separate from the phenomena that is the source. This is duality or Dvaita philosophy. This approach is simple and easy to comprehend by all. It is within our sense perception. IKS creates well-being because of its approach to education. The first approach it has is Dvaita. Dvaita says that differences experienced between us and nature are real. It accepts that individual, the jiva, and nature, that is Prakriti, can never be one. It is useful because quantum physics can't be taught in grade 1. All scientists know the truth as in quantum physics, yet it is not taught in grade 1. Can students grasp that whatever they see is not reality but an illusion? To enable this, IKS explores the source. The examples used to describe the source is sugar in Dvaita, as it is sweetness itself or selfless love. The mind has to extract the source from within itself. It is likened to a sugar cane that has sugar within itself, but it has to be extracted and refined in a particular way. Similarly, for selfless love, the ancient Indian dualistic philosophical approach Dvaita wants to be neither the sugar nor the sugar cane. Both cannot taste themselves. It wants to taste the sweetness of both like an ant. It says we are separate as humans and the purpose is to enjoy the taste of sugar and sugarcane. If the source, the all-seeing eye sitting on the chair is selfless love, Dvaita wants to experience its selfless love by being distinct from it. For this, constant devotion to selfless love and an unending desire to experience it is needed. Dvaita philosophy contradicts the other two philosophies. It states that the source, God, is our only true friend, for its love is unconditional and God's friendship does not seek any purpose. It states that the visible world is real and it is created to experience selfless love, that is its essence. Thus, sense perception is used to love all and serve all. The source, Brahman, is thus not the only reality. Quantum physics finds that reality cannot be experienced by sense perception. Dvaita has to be lived in by devotion to excellence in all dimensions, filled with goodness. Such devotion should be continuous as prana or breath in us. This path of devotion is personal, may not be suited for a curriculum design. Its way of devotion is to do every action as if the source or Lord is receiving it. When this is the feeling in the heart, the actions seek excellence, filled with goodness, naturally. What can be taught as a curriculum? Vishishta Advaita. The truth revealed in quantum physics experiments is difficult for the mind to visualize and keep this visualization steady always. Yet this is reality. That this truth exists cannot be doubted. Education can't ignore it. Yet the reality of sense perception's experience and the quantum truth indeed oppose one another. The truth that sense perception believes is ever changing. It doesn't remain the same, yet we believe in it. If we look at nature, its seasons change. If we look at people, our relationships with them may change. If we look at ourselves, the body itself keeps changing with signs of old age appearing. On the other hand, the truth behind quantum lab results, as in Advaita philosophical approach, is never changing. It is constant in the processes of creation, preservation, and creative destruction. It is based on the energy that is empowering these processes. Our world is indeed strange. What we accept as reality is ever changing. What we deny is the never changing reality. Despite many experiences of losses and difficulties, we cling to the ever changing phenomena as the only truth. This is our nature. How to educate this nature? To meet this challenge, IKS uses Vishishta Advaita. Vishishta Advaita accepts that some things in nature are inert and other things have consciousness. But it states that both emanate from the same source. Hence, three things exist in the world: the individual who possesses consciousness and the source. So the world, the individual who possesses consciousness and the source, these are the three things that exist. Vishishta Advaita proclaims their unity, though it accepts that the appearances may be different and there may be varieties of experiences. It asserts that in all these, the unifying spirit, the source, exists. And an example of gold is given. Although its ornaments have different shapes, the gold that creates them is one. This logic is supported by quantum physics experiments. But one major difference continues to exist. There is no way that any laboratory can explore the source. The laboratories can only conclude the oneness of atoms that power all creation. It is only an elevated state of consciousness that can explore the truth of the source that creates this underlying unity. Vishishtadvaita is the IKS, that creates this elevated state of consciousness. From this point of view of unity of creation, a dynamic balance within the individual can be created. To visualize the dynamic balance within all creation, only if you are dynamic balance within can you see the dynamic balance outside. Advaita creates an absolute balance within oneself and all of creation. From the eyes of its selfless love, one can only see eternal peace or prashanti. That is Advaita. It is, however, an individual journey. It is initiated by Vishishtadvaita tradition, but it needs a different instructor, someone who lives in its experience always. This course can only try to catalyze it by practice. This course lays a deep emphasis on practice. Every attempt is made to make all the lectures very short. A 5-minute slot at the end of this lecture is being given for silent sitting. This is to enable the participant to mull over what is said. Whatever has been heard should be repeated in the mind so that it gets absorbed. Just as sugar is stirred in a cup of tea or coffee with a spoon, use the spoon of silence to stir the sugar of Indian knowledge systems in your mind. It takes some time for the tea or coffee to become sweet. Patience is very important. The perspectives shared in the course will seem meaningful only if such silent sitting is done to mull over what has been said. Else, the half an hour spent in delivering the lectures will be a waste of time. We welcome you to undertake an inner journey during these 5 minutes. Only then will knowledge that is outside you will become wisdom inside you. The time allocated for this is actually 20 minutes, not 5 minutes. The time should be increased gradually. This is also a time for the mind to take rest. In case it cannot do that, mull over whether the voice of the conscience has guided you at any time in life till now. We accept challenges for the physical body in games. In a gym, we can have a 20 minutes plank challenge. We may exchange challenges on the quantity of food we can eat. Can we go beyond such challenges to the second step of the Indian knowledge systems? Can we see if the mind itself can take rest and maybe stop working? Can we explore what will happen if it becomes zero? Remember, it is not good to challenge the mind. It rebels and makes you do the opposite of what you want it to do. It is far simpler to observe the mind. For doing this, first the physical body should move as little as possible. Observe the mind as it tells the body to move. You are not telling the body to move. The mind is telling the body to move. Observe the mind. Move away from the mind and see what it is forcing the body to do. Watch the mind as if you are sitting on a fan at a distance. When you are at home, Shavasana in yoga is a good posture for this practice. Try to first silence the body, then the mind. For those who have mastered this, they can try the next method. When you think of nothing, can you experience love without giving it a shape of a thing like your favorite food, or a thing that you want to own, or the physical form of a person? Can it just be love without an emotion to a person or a thing? Can it be love for the sake of love? How do you experience loving yourself? The purpose of this course is to help you discover yourself, that loving being beyond the body and the mind.